Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Tommo and welcome to my pre-race Chinwag for the 2024 Sao Paulo Grand Prix, Brazilian Grand Prix. It's technically the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, but for SEO I've put Brazilian in the title and the thumbnail. Welcome everyone live here on YouTube. Henry, Shroomy, Artie, IBK, Lachlan, Jay, Twumo. That's very close to my name. Very, very close to my name. Welcome to you all here live on YouTube. Welcome to everyone listening after the fact on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the rest. I upload this in full video version on Spotify afterwards as well if you want to watch me over there. And thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. You can support me on Patreon. There are links down in the description below. Soft tier here on YouTube for a couple of quid a month, or medium and hard tier over on Patreon. I will be doing a Patreon exclusive live stream straight after this one, about 5 minutes after, where we can just kind of shoot and chat about whatever in a less formulaic, less show way like this show is. This show is firmly on the road. Welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. Let's talk round 21, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix from Interlagos, a beautiful track steeped in heritage. It's like a big karting circuit. I would say for me, if I could drive any Formula One track, and not even in a Formula One car, because to be honest, like in a Formula One car, it would be so overwhelming because it's like too quick. Like if I could drive like a GT car, like a GT3, DTM, Super GT spec car, I think I'd pick Interlagos. Because I know this track really well from my sim days, which are kind of, not so much anymore, to be honest. But I love Interlagos. It's a great track to race on a simulator. It's a great track to watch Formula One racing going at. A McLaren P1, yeah, I'd take P1. I would prefer to drive around Interlagos than Spa. Yash, I would. Spa's great, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't turn down Spa, but I think Interlagos would be my number one over Spa, over Silverstone, to like actually drive around. Experience it's the undulation as well. I know you get that at Spa, but it's the undulation. It's a very compact circuit. It kind of goes in on itself. It's relatively small, but it's steeped in history, and many a great moment has happened around Interlagos. And also, no shade to any Belgians out there. Okay, I'm sure it's great atmosphere at Spa. It brings people from all over Europe, but there's something about the Brazilian fan base in Interlagos which is just a little bit special, I think. A little bit special. Favourite Interlagos moment, Siraj? I mean, the one that immediately comes to mind, and obviously every year as well, we there's many a Senna tribute this week, but when he won, did he win around Interlagos when his gearbox broke? And he literally was like passing out on the podium afterwards. Like that was one of Ayrton's most iconic moments, I think, around Interlagos. That was serious. Is that Glock? I mean, it's hard to look past Is that Glock in terms of iconic, but I always think back to that Senna one. That sticks in my mind. That was power steering. Yeah, was it power steering or wasn't it the gearbox as well though? I'm sure it was a gearbox. Or maybe I'm confusing that for something else. The radio for that Senna win is immaculate. Yeah, I mean, again, that's before my time, but that's the one that always kind of comes to mind. And welcome Henry, by the way, who's just joined Friends of Tommo here on YouTube. Appreciate that. Well, it used to be called Friends of Tommo. Now it's the soft tier membership. But yes, round 21, Sao Paulo, Interlagos. What happened last time out? Well, Max Verstappen won. It's 2023. But this was a slightly more hard-fought victory for Max. Slightly. Lando had a great start. But then there was a red flag pretty immediately because of a big crash at the start. Ricardo had his rear wing broken. The Haas was out of K-Mag. Alex was out as well. And then, of course, you had, Fernando Alonso sitting on the podium, which is mad. This wasn't even a year ago. Not even 12 months ago. There was an Aston Martin fighting for the podium and getting a podium, pretty on merit. Obviously, Perez was making his way through and we got that fantastic couple of last laps scrap. Obviously, after my video that I put out yesterday, saying that I think Max deserved a harsher penalty for that Turn 7 incident. As you can imagine, obviously, it's a contentious one, and it's not going to be a popular video amongst many a fan, and that's fine. But I've seen the criticism of, you don't like hard racing. Go watch back Interlagos last year and watch Checo versus Fernando. That's what I want to see. That is what I consider hard racing. That's what I consider hard, fair, exciting racing. If you want to see people just get pushed off track and that's your definition of hard racing, then go for it. But that's not mine. That's all I'll say. Thank you, Scott, by the way, for the super chat. Appreciate it. Greatest atmosphere at any track. Love you, Tommo. Thank you, Scott. Very kind of you. You love my content and what I create, and I appreciate that, Scott. Thank you very, very, very kindly. Go watch NASCAR. And listen, that's part of what makes NASCAR what it is. It's very bumpy. It's very wheel to wheel. It's very fighty. If that's what you want, fine. But that's not what I consider racing to be. And I think you look at vast majority of other categories, especially open wheeler categories where you can't have that bumping, right? In touring cars, you know, rubbing's racing, right? Because you can get away with it. In open wheelers, it's a bit different. You do have to abide by certain more restricted rules if you're racing IndyCar, Super Formula, Formula One, whatever, versus DTM, Super GT, NASCAR, blah, blah, blah. But yes, anyway, it was a cracking race last year. Mercedes were absolutely nowhere in pace. They were dropping like an absolute stone as well. But yeah, it was good vibes seeing Fernando on the podium. Great vibes seeing Fernando on the podium. Can they do it again, Aston Martin? I don't think so. Thank you again, Scott. Very kind of you. Appreciate that, mate. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's how quickly things... I just can't believe... this was Aston's last decent race, wasn't it? I feel like it was their last decent race. Did they have any good ones after Sao Paulo and before the end of the season? I don't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like this was the last really good race from Aston Martin, and then it just kind of fell away and has continued to fall away to a point where Aston Martin are arguably slower than Haas right now, possibly slower than Racing Bulls. We didn't really get to see them fully utilise the pace they had in their car because Yuki went out on turn one. Liam was on a suboptimal strategy and then got caught in loads of shenanigans as well. So Vegas was all right. Yeah, Vegas was all right. Yeah, to be fair, Vegas was all right, but yeah, this was definitely the beginning of the end of Aston Martin's 2023 resurgence anyway. But great race last time. Let's hope we get the same again. These are the driver standings after 20 of 24 race weekends so far. Again, the gap at the front is 47 points. Advantage Max Verstappen. 4 races, 2 sprints. Will Lando, I don't see it. Almost the Ferrari resurgence as of late is even more reason for this not to happen. Because the thing is, you can argue that, well, the Ferrari resurgence means the Ferraris finish ahead of Max. Sure. But they've resurged too much for a championship fight. Because now they're beating Lando. I don't necessarily think they're quicker than Lando. I think Ferrari, are extracting. They've got, Carlos and Charles, who are, and Oscar's had a slight dip of form as of late, which I did point out on Twitter, and I got absolutely lambasted by Piastri fans, which I was like, hang on a second. It's okay. Drivers have slight dips in form. It happens to everyone. Okay. Oscar's not special in that regard. But yeah, it's almost too much Ferrari vibes to the extent where they could win the constructors. They could well win the constructors championship. But yes, in terms of drivers, it's still a massive order for Lando. It's still mathematically possible. It's mathematically possible for Piastri to win the drivers championship technically, but of course that's not going to happen. I would suggest that Max could serve an engine penalty this weekend. There's been talk of that, potentially, which would require a recovery drive from him. Obviously, it's a bit different, the sprints this year, remember, because they are more isolated from the race. Now, do I think... Interlagos is a track where you can take an engine penalty and recover through. We saw that from Lewis Hamilton in 2021, wasn't it? When he took a engine pen in Brazil and just steamed through the field. But of course, that was, in a Mercedes that, him in his Mercedes and Max in his Red Bull were a cut above the rest this year, which I don't think that's the case. And it's certainly not the case for Max this year. He's in, third quickest car seemingly at the moment. Mercedes were great around here in 2022, but they were absolute trash around here last year. So, hard to say. Grid's too close now. Exactly, MGT. Exactly. Chinwag pole. I mean, Tommy has done it before. He's done it before. He could do it again. Rainy Brazilian Grand Prix. Adrian, you know what? That's a fantastic shout, actually. Let's have a quick look. Weather report Interlagos. See if I can... Okay, so according to the Google, we got a bit of rain. We got a 50% chance of precipitation on Saturday, and a 70% chance of precipitation on Sunday. Now, of course, rain is the great equaliser. We know Max is an absolute phenom in the wet, especially around Brazil as well. Remember Brazil in 2016 when he had that massive moment and he held it around Brazil? I'm sure that was 2016 when he was in Red Bull, wasn't it? Yeah, so the great equaliser, rain could be a saving grace here for Max Verstappen. It could well be a saving grace for Max Verstappen. And then, of course, you know, if it's raining, is it more advantageous to take a grid drop, an engine penalty, when it rains? Because there's more chance of safety cars and therefore opportunities to leapfrog and, you know, fight your way through from the back. Hard to say. No, he had that moment in testing, Lou, where he had that big... well, no, it wasn't even testing, was it? It was like, wasn't it FP1, Max? And it was in the dry, and he had that drift, and he had that big moment, and he saved it. I think he was driving like Jean-Eric Vergne's car or something. I remember that one, but he had another moment in Brazil in the wet when he almost lost it and almost shoved it in the wall. Thank you, Samo, by the way, for the super chat. Goat cleanest graphics on YouTube. Needs a shout. Thank you, Samo. Appreciate that. I'll try my best, and I like reworking my graphics every year. Just a nice little graphic. Keep my graphic designer brain engaged, because that's what I used to do before this job, and I like to kind of try and keep challenging myself. You know, how many different ways can I incorporate pink and very dark grey and white into graphics? I'm up for a wet race. It's been ages. Absolutely, Tommy. I completely agree. Absolutely agree. A wet race would be... A wet banger would be lovely. And we know Lance Stroll loves a wet. He's good in the wet, old Lance. Wet banger inbound, maybe. Maybe. But yes, driver standings-wise, look, all that matters in the driver standings is P1 at the end of the day. Constructors is the much more interesting, realistic battle going on here, because we've got, of course, the top... Well, Red Bull are not... They're third now. That's done, okay? There's been talk of Checo potentially getting replaced after Brazil, which is... I'm just a bit bored of talking about Perez being bad in a Red Bull, because it's just been the same story for so long now. And it's like you're flogging a dead horse. Like, it's just... I've got nothing more to say. I've got nothing more to say about Checo in a Red Bull that I haven't said many times already. So, yeah. They might replace him, they might not. I've got nothing more to say. What else is there to say? It's a square peg round hole. It's been that case ever since he joined that team, and it was the same with Albon and the same with Gasly, to be honest. But yes, in terms of 29 points between McLaren and Ferrari, 25 between Ferrari and Red Bull, that doesn't really matter. The fight for P1 in the constructors is going to go down to the wire. I think I did a poll after Mexico on the post-race, and I'm pretty sure you lot voted Ferrari to win the constructors here. I think it was about a 70-30 split. Thank you, Cammy, by the way, for the super chat. And the momentum, this should work for Ferrari around here. Qatar should favour more McLaren. Vegas should work well for Ferrari. Abu Dhabi, I think probably Ferrari's going to be pretty good around Abu Dhabi as well, I would imagine. There's not too much high-speed corner shenanigans going on there. That's where Ferrari tend to struggle. That's why they're going to, not be fantastic in Qatar. But I think that's great, right? Imagine, going into next year, you've got like at least 2, possibly 3, maybe even 4 if Mercedes clean up their act. Teams that go into every Grand Prix where, depending on whether it is a low, medium or high speed, or wherever it's front or rear limiteds, whatever that track may be, you're going to get one of those 3-4 teams being the quickest and one of them inherently being the slowest of those four. I mean, that's a great place for F1 to be in. Because, like, the teams are, right, you know what, like, certain tracks, right, boom, Ferrari, we're going to be sick around Monaco. We're going to be sick around Vegas. We're going to be sick around Austin, right? But then we're going to be trash around, I don't know, Spa and Qatar and whatever, and Silverstone. You know what I mean? Like, that's so compelling to me, because then you've got, it's not a spec series, but you've had enough of these regulations where the cars have converged to a point, and then they've all got their own strengths, and the drivers are the same, right? Charles is quite an aggressive style, which, combined with missing FP1, of course, and obviously Ollie, you know, the crash that Ollie had with Alex ended up curtailing his FP2 a bit, but also because of his aggressive style, he does struggle around, you know, low downforce tracks, because it does take a bit more out of the tyres. And I think Carlos has a bit of a smoother style, and it just kind of worked in those conditions in Mexico. All these drivers have strengths and weaknesses. These cars will now start to have strengths and weaknesses, and it's just bubbling up to be unbelievably competitive next year. It's a shame Carlos won't be in that Ferrari, but then Lewis Hamilton will be there instead. So it's a shame for Carlos, but in terms of the spectacle, it's going to be just as good, if not better, with Lewis in the car, right? Because if Lewis can reach his peaks, and if he's still got prime to give, right, which is debatable, is Lewis past his prime? Look, Lewis's prime was so high, to expect him to still be there in his 40s. The same goes for Fernando, right? It is a huge ask. We don't know if Lewis can discover and affirm that he's still operating at those levels. We are on for a hell of a season next year with him and Charles. I can't wait. But anyway, I digress. In terms of constructors, obviously you've got, Haas are trying to catch Aston Martin. Don't think that will happen. 40 points. When you're scrabbling on the end of points, you're asking for, you know, which could happen. You know, Max and Lando, will they trip over each other again between now and the end of the season? You'd put your house on it, wouldn't you? Like, surely it's going to happen again. It's more, you know, Haas Racing Bulls, V-Carb, they did have performance, but again, they didn't really realise it. I feel like they're in a stronger position. Williams, I mean, Alex did get to Q3. It's kind of, he thinks he could have been on for points in Mexico. Hard to say for sure. And Alpine, look, they found something with that update that Pierre Gasly in particular seems to be able to draw performance out of, which is the right driver for Alpine to be drawing performance out, because he's the one who's staying and not going. Sauber won't score a point all season, will they? It's actually going to be a pointless season for Sauber, both figuratively and literally, which is crazy. But it's true. If the rain comes, then it's all up in the air, isn't it? It's all up in the air. Come on, just if Sauber get a point, it ends up being Joe. That I would feel so sorry for Valtteri, because it's been so much better than Joe all season. Imagine if Joe is the one who actually gets the point for Sauber between now and the end of the year. That would be incredible. That would be crazy. But predictions. Let's talk predictions. What are my predictions for the 2024 Sao Paulo Grand Prix? Well, my race winner is Charles Leclerc. I think Ferrari's going to go well around it. I think someone said it in the chat, actually, that Ferrari do seem to have a pretty stable platform. They're not going to be great in Qatar. They're not going to be terrible. And I feel like, you know, Interlagos will suit there's a lot of low speed and kind of medium speed corners. I feel like that's going to suit the Ferrari. Again, the rain could chuck things in the air, but I feel like Ferrari are going to go quick. I think Charles, again, he struggled around Mexico, missing FP1, curtailed FP2, you know, low downforce, not really certain it's suiting his style. Interlagos were at a much lower altitude level, and I feel like, you know, they've got a constructors to win, and he's got a drivers' championship to maybe. It would take something, but maybe Charles can, if he just gets a really good rub of the green between now and the end of the season, he could maybe give himself a glimmer. Like, honestly, imagine Imagine, just picture the scene for a moment. Charles Leclerc wins the 2024 Formula One season. It could happen. It's out there for Lando. But I do look, Lando's talent, it goes without question. But Charles has been up the front and been winning races and been racing wheel to wheel with Max, most importantly, for a lot longer than Lando has. If Charles can get a good rub of the green in Brazil, and Max loses points relative to both Lando and Charles, I think Charles becomes, if they're level on points, if Charles and Lando are level on points, I think Charles becomes the favourite of the two to challenge Max. I guess that's what I'm saying. And especially while, Max and Lando are having their little ding-dongs, if Charles can just keep cooking and just hoover up points, it could absolutely happen. I'm just saying. I think Charles, you guys know, like, I rate Charles. For me, Max is the best driver in F1. Then it's Charles. And then it's like a big glug of drivers after. But them two, for me, just sit above the rest. Max, then Charles. There's a distinction between the two, but it's them two, and then give him the car, and he will cook. Okay? And I know that he could have cooked more in Mexico, but again, he did have things against him. So before you jump down my neck being like, yeah, but Carlos was clear of him in Mexico, Tommo, Lobo. Like, I know, but there's reason to that, okay? Stop, Tommo, you're going to jinx it. Jinxes don't exist, Leonardo. What are you talking about? Okay, so my race winner is Charles Leclerc. Your race winner, 502 of you voted. I was very late posting the poll. I literally only posted it like 2.5 hours ago. So thank you to over 500 of you who did vote in that time. I will try and remember to post it earlier in the week. I completely forgot. My bad. But your race winner of the 502 of you who voted for the 2024 Sao Paulo Grand Prix is Lando Norris. 48% of you think Lando is going to win the race. 25% of you think Charles Leclerc. 8% think Max Verstappen. 7% think Lewis Hamilton. Now, the door's just gone, and Hannah's not home today, so I'm going to give you an ad, and I'll be right back. 2 secs. I just opened the door, as in this door just then, right? Did you see this door open before I came through it? It's Minton! It wasn't Minton at the door, don't worry. It was someone delivering a H&M parcel for Hannah, and he just put it through the letterbox anyway. So when I got down there, he wasn't even at the door. So that was an unnecessary break in proceedings. Hello, Minton. How are you? Let everyone know how you are. Are you good? Are you happy? Are you well? Are you tired? Yeah, of course you're tired. Go on then, right? Into the little bed you go, mate. Lovely. Did you enjoy the break in that stream? Everyone is. You can. I can manually insert mid rolls, and I will do it if you don't behave yourselves. I don't usually, but I will. Lando, 48% of the vote for race winner. 25% Charles Leclerc. 8% Max Verstappen. 7% Lewis Hamilton. Where's Carlos? He's not even in the top 4. Where's Carlos? Where's he gone? Lando win. I mean, look, again, the rain is going to... Look, so many of these drivers are great in the rain. Lando's really good in the wet. But I think, chat, what drivers that are not good in the rain? Any names come to mind of particular drivers who are particularly not good in the rain? No, Stroll is good in the rain. Stroll literally is good in the rain. Bottas, fair. Well, Sargent's not in F1 anymore. Is Russell bad in the rain? But then Spa in the Williams, he put it P2 in the rain, didn't he? which I guess obviously is, it's timing a lot of it, right? But Joe, Lawson's not bad in the rain. Lawson was, when he jumped in Zandvoort last year and in those terrible conditions and had a really good race, and it was raining and he didn't crash. I think is Norris? No, Norris is good. Norris has been good in the rain. Like, obviously Russia, that was a bad choice. No one could have slicks when it was actually raining. Obviously, yeah. But if it just pitted, I don't really think there's anyone who's like bad in the rain. I just don't. I think they're actually all really good in the rain. But I guess maybe we'll see this weekend, won't we? Maybe we'll see this weekend. Right. My prediction for Banger Drive is Fernando Alonso. Now, he had a great race last year. P3 on the podium. I'm expecting that Aston Martin, the car worked for them really well round here last year. And Fernando thinks he was on for a Q3 in qualifying with his lap before Yuki crashed in Mexico. I'm going to give Aston Martin benefit of the doubt this weekend, and I'm going to choose to identify the 2024 Sao Paulo Grand Prix as the moment where Aston Martin finally finds something and moves forward relative to the field and consolidates P5 in the Constructors' Championships. Okay, by banger we mean points. That's what I mean, Lutu. That's what I mean. I think this is the weekend where Aston Martin, and particularly Fernando Alonso, finds something. I'm not talking podium. I'm not talking top 5. I'm talking good points. I'm talking best of the rest. That's what I'm saying, actually. Fernando Alonso, best of the rest this weekend. Your prediction for Banger Drive is Lewis Hamilton, 19% at his kind of surrogate home Grand Prix. He's got a huge support in Brazil, and he loves it here. He's an honorary citizen, isn't he? Lewis Hamilton, 19%. Franco Colapinto, of course, Argentinian. This is as geographically close as he has to a home Grand Prix. So you can imagine there's going to be a crazy amount of support for Franco in Sao Paulo, which would be a good vibe. 8% Oscar Piastri. Again, he's had a few, he went out in SQ1, and then he qualified like 5th in Austin. And then he went out in Q1 in Mexico. So he's had a bit of a wobble in quali form. But I see no good reason why he won't be back comfortably in Q3 fighting for pole possibly. I like to think this is just a little wobble, right? It happens to the best of us. And then 8% Liam Lawson think he's going to have a good weekend as well. Look, again, there seems to be, if you're going to believe the rumour mill, this could be Checo's last race. Just flat out last race, right? Maybe we'll talk about it at the end. There's nothing more to say about Checo's bad form. We know he's a square peg round hole for this team. It's never worked, and it's never going to work. But then I guess there's a more interesting topic is to discuss, if they do drop him after Brazil, what are their realistic, viable options? But yeah. So your banger drive, Lewis Hamilton. My banger drive, Fernando Alonso. Two titans of the sport. Right. My clanger drive this weekend, I'm going with Max. In part because I think he's going to have to serve this engine penalty. Or at least there's rumours that he could be serving an engine penalty. So if he does, I think it's going to be a really difficult weekend for him. Red Bull race pace is in the mud as well. I mean, he was getting caught by K-Mag towards the end. I think rain potentially saves Max here, because I think in the rain, it's a different story entirely. But assuming that we have, which, it's impossible to say for sure, right? Assuming we have some kind of stable conditions, I think this could be a really difficult weekend for Max Verstappen. I'm not even talking about forcing Lando off, blah, blah, blah. The race pace was shocking for him in his Red Bull. Obviously Perez was a mile off, so you can't really, but the fact that Max was losing pace to Magnussen at the end and how far he was off the lead, it was really concerning. Really, really, really concerning for Red Bull. So I think this could be a really difficult weekend for him. That's what I think. Your clanger drive this weekend is Checo. Shock. Always is. 33% of the vote. 17% Max Verstappen. So the Red Bull drivers getting exactly 50% of your vote for clanger driver. 9% Lando Norris. 6% Lance Stroll. You've given it though to those four in. Well, it's always been Checo first, but those four in any order for the last 4 races. You are creatures of habit, chat. That's what you are. Creatures of habit. But yeah, clanger drive, Checo. Yeah, what more can I say? Banger team. Who's gonna do the bits this weekend? I've gone Aston Martin. Look, I'm drinking the green Kool-Aid. Okay, this is the race where it not all flips on its head, but they discover something and move forward. Okay, the chance of nothing unlikely happening is in itself unlikely, and this is what's going to happen this weekend. Okay, let me cook. Let me cook. As for your banger team, you've gone Ferrari, 29% of the vote, just edging out McLaren, 28% of the vote. 15% Haas, they've been very good as of late. 13% Mercedes, really good in 2022, really bad in 2023. Who knows in 2024? Not a Scooby. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully for them, it's just so up and down, isn't it? We can't have another year of this, with especially like poor Kimi Antonelli, jumping into this Mercedes, and it's like up and down, up and down, up and down. Look, maybe it will cook straight out of the gates in 24, but I'm not sure I see it. I'm not sure I see it. And then finally, clanger team, my prediction, Williams. I feel like if Aston Martin take a step up, Haas are very good at the minute and seem to be quicker than Williams. I think Racing Bulls didn't realise their potential fully. I feel like this is going to be a tricky weekend for Williams. I see them being, again, Gasly with that Alpine upgrade. I think Alpine possibly have found something as well. So I'm going to say Williams. I'm not entirely convinced. I mean, Sauber's would just be an easy vote, but I feel like Williams will be like the second worst team this weekend. That's my fault. Franco or Albon though, Tom. I mean, look, obviously Franco's got the almost home Grand Prix vibes going for him. But again, Alex got to Q3 in Mexico. Let's not forget about that. Well, it's easy to overlook that because Franco's been very good as of late, but that doesn't mean Alex has been trash. Okay. And then finally, your clanger team this weekend, Red Bull, 25% of the vote, 22% Aston Martin. You don't believe. You've not drunk the green Kool-Aid, but I have. 12% Sauber, 8% Mercedes. Yeah, I mean, who knows with Mercedes, like I say. Who knows? Okay, cool. So, your predictions are as such. Lando win, Lewis banger, Checo clanger, Ferrari banger, Red Bull clanger. Mine, Charles win, Fernando banger, Max clanger, Aston banger, Williams clanger. It's always nice when we have different predictions, It's always nice. Always like that. Cool. Excellent. Amazing. Lovely. Grazie ragazzi. Glorious. Yeah, I guess the final the final talking point, and the way Christian's been talking has been very much alluding to the fact that they might have to make some difficult decisions. You've got 3 races after the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, 3 opportunities for somebody. You've got Qatar. Vegas, straight lines, difficult, tricky. Abu Dhabi, obviously the finale, very known entity. If Checo has a stinker in... Look, even if they replace Checo with like a Lawson or someone, they are third in the constructors and they're not going to catch Ferrari or McLaren. It doesn't matter who Red Bull puts into that second seat. They're not catching Ferrari or McLaren. Have fun at Sainsbury's, kid. So the purpose of getting Checo out before the end of the season, would essentially be to do like a dry run of somebody between now and the end of the year. Remember, with Red Bull, all of their drivers are contracted to Red Bull GmbH, the organisation, and then they're loaned out to the teams. So it would be, we don't know exactly how these contracts are written, and obviously a lot of those brands that are on the Red Bull, Telmex, Telcel, Claro, these are directly attached to Checo, which complicates it further. But obviously the same in a way about Yuki, with Honda. That is a relationship there that is almost facilitated through Yuki. So you're kind of doing a test run, aren't you? And then it's going to be, so either Liam Lawson, you put him in the Red Bull for the last 3 races. It's Yuki Tsunoda. Because obviously then they can put Hadjar. I'm sure Hadjar has enough super license points. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure he does. You're either doing Lawson, Tsunoda, or Ricciardo. Which, given how unceremoniously they just kind of... look, they've said that it was in joint part Daniel's decision to not just say that he's leaving. Which may be true, but... The question is, what is there to lose? Because it gets to a point where, Red Bull aren't going to catch. There is no realistic driver who jumps into that Red Bull and gets them to outscore Ferrari and McLaren between now and the end of the season. So it's third. That's where they are. They if they haven't accepted that, they need to accept that that's where they are. And then it's right, what helps them make... Because they've gone through Gasly and Albon and now Perez without establishing a driver who can not only be a good backup to Max, but potentially lead the team if Max leaves in 26, which is looking increasingly likely, I think. So, look, if you look at this purely logically and take out any human element at all, you can understand the sense it makes, I'm gonna do a poll in this live chat here on YouTube. By the way, if you're here on YouTube, make sure you like the stream. And take this moment to rate 5 stars on wherever you're listening, if you're Apple Podcast, Spotify, all that. What do for the last 3 races of the year? So if you were in charge, would you keep Perez in? Would you go with Lawson? Would you go with Tsunoda? Because there, for once, YouTube only having 4 poll options actually works, because there are only 3 options, realistically. What would you do at Red Bull for the last 3 races of the year? If you were in charge, right, you've got P3 and you're not going to be able to catch, right? So there's not a Constructors' Championship to fight for anymore. That's done. That's gone. That's gone. Even if Perez has a decent weekend in Brazil, that's gone. They're not going to outscore both Ferrari drivers are cooking, both McLaren drivers. Oscar's had a bit of a wobble, but he will be back. They will continue to cook. So it's what is there to lose? And potentially there's more to gain from giving Lawson or Tsunoda or even Ricciardo a trial for those final 3 races to see if their inherent styles, can adapt to the requirements of this Red Bull. And it's going to give them actual real data. They could just put, Vegas, Liam, you're in. Qatar, Yuki. Abu Dhabi, Daniel. Just do one of each of the 3. They could do that. They could absolutely do that. Will they? That would be hilariously... no, that would be just such a bad look. But they could literally do that. They could literally do that. Keep Perez. He is shockingly bad, but no reason to raise more questions going into next year. Better to see a direct comparison between Yuki and Lawson in the V-Carb. Is it though, Henry? Like, because again, being good in a Toro Rosso, in a V-Carb, whatever, clear, and being good in any car doesn't necessarily correlate to being good in another. Like, Gasly was good in Toro Rosso, really bad in a Red Bull, not just relative to Max, by the way. That's the thing as well, right? It wasn't just that Gasly and Albon were just getting beaten by Max. They were getting beaten by loads of other people as well in other cars. And it's like, just because Gasly was good in Toro Rosso, bad in a Red Bull relative to both Max and the rest of the field, and then really good in the Toro Rosso when he went back. Ricciardo was good in the Red Bull, good in the Renault, bad in the McLaren. Like, the inherent car characteristics required, ideally, the V-Carb, whatever you want to call it, would have the same inherent characteristics as the Red Bull, because then it would be a better proving ground for a driver to go into that Red Bull. What we've seen from Gasly and from Albon is that doesn't appear to be the case. And that car, whether it's a Toro Rosso or whatever, doesn't seem to prepare drivers well enough for the specific requirements of the Red Bull racing car. And look, McLaren's got specific requirements, and we saw Daniel get bitten by that. And there's plenty of examples through history of drivers moving team and not being able to bring that performance with them. Even look, Vettel, within the same team, 2013 to 2014. That Red Bull car changed, and it clearly moved from a style that he was really comfortable with in 2013 to one he was not in 2014. So this has continually been the problem for Red Bull, is that they seem to have a car that does require and have certain idiosyncrasies about it that need a certain style to optimize it, because you've got Gasly, Albon and Perez, who are all three proven good, at least good F1 drivers, okay? And Perez has had some really good peaks, especially in 2020. So being Lawson and Tsunoda being good in a V-Carb kind of is irrelevant in a lot of ways, because you look at the history, and surely that teaches us more than anything, right? So in theory, that makes sense. In theory, it's like, yeah, you put Lawson and Tsunoda together in the V-Carb, and whoever does better, who deserves it more. Red Bull, if caring about who deserves it more is not going to solve the problem, because Perez deserved the seat over Albon, got it, and he didn't do much better. He did a bit better, but he didn't do much better relative to Max than Gasly or Albon had done. It's not about who deserves it more by this stage, because that approach hasn't worked. It's who can drive this car. I think Lawson would be the best, because I think he's been part of the Red Bull Academy for a long time. He's done a lot of sim miles in the Red Bull car, and you would think that he's got. But again, look, Albon was parachuted in super last minute to Toro Rosso, and then just put in the Red Bull midway through his rookie season. Gasly, you could argue, should have maybe been a bit better prepared, but I feel like Lawson's had more. Look, I think Lawson would be going into a Red Bull more prepared for the Red Bull and the specific requirements of that Red Bull than Gasly or Albon were. And Yuki's never driven a Red Bull car before, right? Daniel has driven a Red Bull a very long time ago, but would his inherent natural style fit what this Red Bull currently needs? I don't know. But I feel like in order of certainty, I would go Lawson, Ricciardo, Tsunoda in that order. Even though I think Yuki probably in terms of deserves, I would put Tsunoda, then, to be honest, probably Lawson and then Ricciardo. So, but what matters more? Who's going to actually be able to drive the car, or who deserves it more? you know? And if you're Christian Horner, you can't be... Wow, okay. This poll is crazy close. So 790 of you have voted. 23% of you think they should keep Perez in for the final 3 races of the season. 33% of you think Liam Lawson for the final 3 races of the season. 22% Yuki Tsunoda for the final 3 races of the season. And 22% Daniel Ricciardo for the final 3 races of the season. Damn. Look, and another thing that goes against Yuki is that, you know, his Honda backing is clearly an important part of why he's there. But Red Bull, you know, if they'd have seen enough to want to promote him, they'd have done it already. And it seems that they don't have enough faith in Yuki. Maybe not even in his ability to drive the car, but his like approach and his mentality and all these extra factors that go into it outside of just being quick behind a wheel. Plus Honda are leaving to Aston Martin, right? So he's potentially going to be pulling away anyway. Whereas Liam is fully theirs. And there's no like strings attached with Liam. Because Liam isn't really bringing sponsors. So there's not that requirement. Like if Liam's good enough, then they'll give him the opportunity. And if he's not good enough, then they'll get rid of him. They don't need to worry about, like with Checo, keeping Checo's sponsors happy and balancing the books in that regard. And then obviously Ricciardo, there's no strings attached with Ricciardo. He would be fully theirs if they gave him the opportunity, but also it seemed to end quite unceremoniously, and it would be a stretch. I mean, it's funny because like when Christian was talking about it after Ricciardo went, he did that F1 Nation podcast, didn't he? And he was like, he did say, which you think, oh, he's just joking. He was like, oh, you know, never write off Ricciardo coming back, like in the Red Bull seat. Like, not words to that effect. He didn't literally say that, but like words to that effect. And it's like, I mean, there is, that's what I mean. I've said this throughout, right? There is a chance that Ricciardo's inherent natural style would fit this Red Bull. Because Ricciardo wasn't... The thing is, Ricciardo's not been bad. Like, when he's been in the car this year, he's not been bad. Like, he's just been okay. And he's beaten Yuki sometimes, but he's not... Yuki's beaten him plenty of times. And you could argue this kind of second half of the season, Ricciardo was slightly better than Tsunoda. But he wasn't good enough to really, you know, be like, right... I'm going to slap up Yuki and I'm going to take this Red Bull seat from Perez. But like I said it so many times, like it's not about who deserves it, it's who's going to actually be able to drive this car. Not bad. He's not been horrendous, DH. That's just not true. Look at Ricciardo's result. Like, relative to Ricciardo's peak, right, and what we expect from him, sure, it's not been anywhere near those levels. But just as... Take all the names away and just attribute him as driver K, right? A, B, C, D, you know, his driver K. Like, he's not been bad. It's just not been great either. It's been very mid. And, you know, he needed to do more to really affirm to Red Bull that he was the guy for that seat. But, I don't know. Maybe things change. Anyway, right, I think that's about enough for this Chinwag. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for voting. Thank you all for getting involved. I'm going to wrap this one up, and in about 5 minutes, I'll go live on Patreon. So if you do want to support me on Patreon and get access to the exclusive Patreon live stream, that will be 5 minutes after this one, then links in the description down below. Patreon.com/TOMMO'F1 if you want to support what I do and get involved in the community chat we've got over there. I upload many pictures of Minton, of course. And we can just... It's a smaller community to just chat about the races and get involved, and yeah. And I much prefer it to Discord. Discord just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. But yeah, and thank you Jabril for the super chat as well. Off topic, if Albon ever leaves F1, could he ever become an IndyCar champ? I mean, a lot of, you know, you need to be in the right team as well in IndyCar. It's a spec series, but you need to be in the right team. He could absolutely be competitive in IndyCar. I've got no doubt about that at all. Could he be champ? I mean, If you got the right team, maybe. Thank you, Moss, as well, for the super chat. Potentially buy out Sainz's contract for Williams. Now, I mean, look, Red Bull could have made that decision earlier on, and they didn't for whatever reason. It's crazy that they didn't sign Sainz. But also, there's no guarantee Sainz's inherent style would have fitted with the requirements of this Red Bull. He's a very versatile driver, Carlos, but he does also have a preference. So even then, it's not a guarantee. It's really not a guarantee getting Carlos Sainz in at Red Bull. But we'll see. And thank you, Lenny, as well. Rick Ball. You think Ricardo, Rick Ball? You're slightly deluded. No. Be deluded. This is a delusion-friendly zone. Okay, you're welcome to be deluded here. And thank you, Dylan, as well. Who do you think is best placed for a title fight next season? Having Mercedes known they're fourth this season and focused on next year for longer. The thing is, it's not a change in regulations next year. It's just an evolution of the current. I'd put Ferrari as I think Ferrari with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. I would put them as my favourites for the best, say constructors or drivers, right? But for the best team car combination, I'd probably put Ferrari as favourites, in my opinion. But yes, thank you all for supporting, watching what I do. It means the world to me, it really does. And I'll see some of you over on Patreon very shortly. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.